Hello and welcome to the EV Charging Podcast, where we take you behind the scenes of the electric vehicle charging industry in Australia and all around the world. I'm Daniel Carson.
And I'm Jeff Sykes.
And we're your hosts from Solar Choice, your go-to trusted independent advisor for all things clean energy in residential, commercial and strata buildings. For this week's episode, we've got a slightly different format from usual. We're bringing you two short conversations from guests who play very different roles in the EV charging industry. First up, a brief conversation with Catherine van der Merwe, a policy officer at the Smart Energy Council. And in the second half of our episode, we'll chat to Geordie Zafiris, a solutions engineer at Fronius.
I'm going to introduce today's guest, which is Catherine van der Merwe.
Nailed
it. Welcome to the podcast. Catherine is a policy officer with the Smart Energy Council and previously has been very interestingly involved in the Belgian energy market, consulting with a list of 25 companies that we're soon to hear a little bit about. But first off, Catherine, for our audience, let us know who the Smart Energy Council is, what their role is, and particularly when it comes to electric vehicle charging.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for having me on. I am honoured to be featured in this series with a lot of amazing movers and shakers in the EV space in Australia. But to start with, the Smart Energy Council, I've been working with them for just under a year now. They are an industry organisation for the renewable sector with roots in PV academia. So solar and batteries are really, in the lifeblood of the Smart Energy Council. Today, it is far beyond those PV roots, however, from large-scale renewables all the way through to what we call smart transport and zero-emission transport technologies. And that extends through to stewardship programs and amazing gender action work into the renewable hydrogen and ammonia sectors. We like to keep ourselves busy over here.
That's great. And in an industry that's changed so much over the last decade, there could be a whole list of new industries in a few years' time that the Smart Energy Council is advocating in. So it's an exciting space to be in, which leads me to ask you, it'd be interesting to hear your story of how you got involved in the renewable energy industry. I understand you're originally from Coffs Harbour, a regional New South Wales town. So how did you find yourself in this particular role?
Yeah, well, it feels like many moons ago when I was graduating from high school in Coffs Harbour. It's one of the most sunny, beautiful parts of this country. And that is the New South Wales has some interesting climate policy. And after I think it was the 2018 bushfires, it really kind of woke a lot of people up, including myself, about the fact that we're on the edge here. We are seeing the impacts of climate change in our day-to-day lives, in, what we think of when we think of home. And so when I went to university, I went to University of Melbourne. From the University of Melbourne, I did a Bachelor of Arts with a focus in international relations and political studies. And I didn't know where that was going to lead me. I definitely wasn't thinking about my career when I chose a Bachelor of Arts, shocker. But I had an amazing time and brushed shoulders with some really awesome people in the public policy space. So moving past graduation at the end of 2022, I started working in shipping. Actually, I was working in logistics for a company called TS Lines with an amazing team. And that was the first time I started working with international organizations and realized that they are what makes Australia run, supply chain, value chain, how we get all the bits and pieces that make our lives what they are. From there, I was referred by a friend, to apply for a job with the Belgian Ministry for Trade here in Melbourne. They actually have an office in Docklands. And I got to manage the economic mission to Australia. So it was actually a royal economic mission to Australia. No, I did not meet a royal. I was too afraid to introduce myself, but it was incredible. And I got the energy portfolio. So I was working alongside companies out of Belgium, actually the most northern region of Belgium, Flanders, that borders the sea there.
Mm-hmm.
So from ports through to innovators in the space, hydrogen, really started getting the feel for the renewable energy ecosystem there and learning lots. The amount that I Googled after every meeting was a crime.
We've all been there.
Absolutely. I think that's how a lot of people get their start in the industry. Sometimes there's a bit of a spark of passion. And then once you think you're in the right place, you just learn as much as you can to catch up and start to find your own way. So maybe you could just tell us a bit more about how your role fits into the very wide remit of the council then.
Absolutely. So I manage all of our smart transport advocacy work. At the council, we have a very varied team, and how we structure that is our policy officers get portfolios, whether that's consumer energy and kind of this distributed energy resource space. We have people in, as I said, the renewable hydrogen sector, people in the stewardship sector. So I really own, in a way, the smart transport world. So all of our wonderful member companies that we work with that dip their toes or are fully involved in the smart transport advocacy space, I engage with them. So that's most of my week, whether it's through our working groups or just one-on-one phone calls or our group chat. I'm tapping into all of their worlds, their ecosystems, trying to figure out what is in the way for them. What are the hurdles? What's going well? Are these trials interesting? Is that grant too restrictive? And then working with them and some awesome, what I call nerds in industry, to figure out where the pinch points are for key, future horizon smart transport things, and see where I can make a change. Mm-hmm. Whether that's government, submission and consultation, whether that's actually talking directly to ministers, whether it's just actually bringing people who are fighting for the same thing but talking in different directions together. So that's what the policy officers at the Smart Energy Council do, and that's what I try and do.
Awesome. Okay, well, let's jump into a topic that is, I think, top of mind for Smart Energy Council, which is some of the misinformation that it surrounds electric vehicles. And it's not uncommon for a new product to come into the market, for a lot of consumers to be unsure and to perhaps hyperbolize some of the risks that surround these new products. And as you mentioned earlier, Australia is a little bit of a laggard behind some of the other foreign markets when it comes to adoption of EVs. So what role do you think misinformation around, things like batteries, fire risks play in the adoption of EVs?
I don't think the impact that misinformation has on EV uptake could be understated, actually. We are seeing more and more so, of course, as we head into the election, but also as EV uptake increases, a lot of people and potentially bad actors are coming out with narratives that aren't grounded in fact. Mm-hmm. I might go so far as to say. And misinformation and disinformation, it erodes public confidence. It doesn't matter if it's right or wrong. If you hear something enough times, especially, Australian consumers who don't have enough time to be poring over the articles that we do or talking to the folks that we get paid to talk to. And it's really, really concerning when these people are saying things, and a lot of the time media is saying things that aren't true and actually reshaping what industry is saying to make it fit their narratives. And that's of utmost concern at Smart Energy Council. And we're doing a lot of work in this space and engaging with awesome companies like the Electric Vehicle Council, like NRMA, and with, of course, our wonderful members to try and figure out how to push back, because we need to.
Is there sort of a part of the workflow where you're trying to separate the intentional misinformation campaigns and just general consumers who are stuck in that cycle of consuming media, consuming misinformation, and then in the echo chamber, particularly with social media, they become voices that are putting incorrect information out there? Do you deal with those two different groups in different ways?
Absolutely. With consumers, we know that the more that we can share the good word, the more that we can actually give platform to awesome evidence-based studies. Look at platforms like EV FireSafe. That's a government body who's like, actually, EVs are less likely to catch fire than ICE vehicles. EVs have a lower center of gravity and it makes them more safe to handle on the road, decreasing roll risk. And EVs have to have, by regulation, a stronger carriage, the part that you drive in. It has to be more structurally integral. And they're, as a result, performing better in crash tests than ICE counterparts, really amplifying those stories and shining lights on people loving their EVs and enjoying the charging infrastructure that's available in states like WA or, states like Victoria. really helping the consumer have an informed choice. So putting these narratives in the same context, giving it to social media, but also, there was a wonderful Media Watch article that also shone a light on this misinformation and almost a myth-busting kind of way. That is so important because, again, if we keep saying the good word and they keep saying the not so good word, there will be balance and consumers will then be like, maybe this isn't so simple or cut and dry, and I'll go do my own research. And that research will show them that, EVs are great. EVs are the way to go.
It feels a little bit like the solar industry 10 years ago when there was a few, news stories around solar panel systems setting on fire. And, although it was one in maybe 1 million solar systems that have been put in, and there were obviously some dodgy installation practices going on back then as well. But it seems like those negative stories were much more shareable, much more digestible to a mass audience who, is more interested in an exciting story like something burning rather than just knowing that an electric vehicle is a very safe and long-term asset.
It's so true. And I think fire risk has a particular hold on us all. Fires are one of the scariest things that can happen. And our cars are what drive us from point A to point B. We take our kids to soccer practice in them. They're in our homes. They park in our garages for a lot of Aussies. And the thought that they could potentially be a threat is incredibly upsetting, as it should be. But it's unfortunately, that upset that makes it such a fantastic tool for people who don't believe in EVs and want to spread the misinformation that they're of more danger. It's what makes it so useful for them when it's not true.
Yeah, okay. And look, the fire's an obvious one. The other one that always comes up is range anxiety. So, how far will my electric vehicle take me? Will I get stranded on the side of the road? Something I have a little personal experience with, but where do you classify that? Is there some truth to range anxiety with the current technology of electric vehicles, or is it something that's not necessarily a concern for a potential owner?
I don't think any consumer should ever, be told that their anxieties aren't correct. Our cars are, in Australia, the way we get around a lot of the time. And to be stranded on the side of the road, that's a scary prospect. First time I got a flat tire and ended up on the side of the road and I had to call roadside, I cried until they showed up and then I cried some more. So I don't think it's unreasonable for them to be concerned about that. But the average EV sold today has a range of over 300 kilometers. That's a long distance. The average Aussie drives 40, 50 Ks a day. So I would say choosing the right EV for you and asking questions about the range when you're thinking of buying one and mapping out your local charging infrastructure, making sure you have the right charger at home. And, you can use your odometer. Oh my goodness, I do not know what the device is that you use to measure your point A to point B. Do it for a week. Do it every day. Do it over your holidays. See how much you're actually driving. Because you're right, when petrol stations are on every corner, it's not a concern when you run low. But with EV infrastructure expanding, it's going to be the same equation sooner than we all think it will happen. The market is showing that people are interested in EVs and the uptake is strong and charging infrastructure is rolling out aggressively. And soon it won't be a range anxiety question. It will be like, where's the best service station with the best food that I can park my EV for 30 minutes while I grab a bite?
And that's if you ever even end up at a service station. My experience of being an EV owner for a couple of years now is that my sort of typical day-to-day is maybe at most a 50-kilometre round trip to work and back. And I'm pretty sure I haven't seen the electric vehicle go below 80% battery in several months. And in fact, I had this instance where I needed to get some batteries for something at home. I'm like, look, well, next time I'm at a service station, I'll pick up some batteries. And the weeks led to months. And I'm like, maybe I'm never going to make it to a service station again. So in fact, a lot of I think the perception is, I'm going to spend all this time charging my vehicle at a service station when the experience is actually the opposite, because you can basically fill up your car every time you park it at home. You've basically got a full tank of petrol, so to speak, every time you set on a trip. And, those side of the road charges really only come up in long distance drives, which, I think if people really think about their habits, for most people, something that happens more than a couple of times a year.
That's exactly right. And God knows we can all do with more time at home. I say that I work from home. I love it.
I think it really does go to show that maybe for prospective EV buyers, especially people thinking about whether their next car will be an EV or would be an ICE vehicle or a hybrid, it actually pays to do your homework for yourself. I think when we talk about doing homework or doing research, a lot of people think about going online, getting on Google, and that's where they can very easily run into all sorts of information, correct or incorrect, especially if for them doing research means getting on social media. But in fact, doing your homework for an EV can be a lot closer to home, literally thinking about what are my habits, what's going to make sense for me, where do I work, where do I play? And I think the majority of people will end up in camp like you, Jeff.
Are you saying you don't do your research on social media, or?
Not for most things, no. I research new music on social media. Does that count?
We'll let you off with that one. Are there any resources other than, of course, the wonderful Solar Choice, where you can freely educate yourself on electric vehicle charging? Is there anywhere else that you'd recommend, a potential consumer who is interested in buying an electric vehicle to go to get some balanced education and advice on this stuff?
NRMA has put out some wonderful survey results and report results. I think there's some great resources at the Electric Vehicle Council. And, I know that we have a lot of really exciting pieces coming in connection with wonderful players in the space. So check out Smart Energy Council.
So just to throw some numbers there, currently there are 180,000 electric vehicles on the roads. Assuming an average battery size of 60 kilowatt hours per EV, that gives us around 11 gigawatts of battery storage. That's pretty baffling. And to put that in context, based on last year's figure, the entire electricity market used about 20 gigawatts per hour. So that means all of the EVs on the road today could power the entire electricity grid for about 35 minutes. And that's with less than 1% of the vehicles being electrified. So the future, when we get to even 10%, 20% of the vehicles on the road being electric vehicles, this is an enormous asset and can really transform the way that the grid works here in Australia, particularly as we see the share of renewables increase and increase. So tell us a little bit about how you see the sort of more immediate opportunities of vehicle to grid. And maybe it's good to start with where we're at in terms of the journey of that being permitted and allowed in Australia, because we're not quite there yet.
That's exactly right. Internally, we kind of explore the vehicle to grid, vehicle to home, vehicle to everything world as a catch-all term, batteries on wheels, because that's what modern EVs are. As you said, these batteries are massive. Some of these cars on a full charge of battery can power the average Australian home for 3 whole days. And that's not even tapping into their lowest reserves. That resource, and it being, owned by everyone, owned by you, owned by me, it is something that we're going to have to watch the space very carefully on, because typically energy storage on that scale, as you said, really good chunks of the NEM, the National Energy Market, being actually not controlled by networks or by governments or by energy retailers even, but by everyday Australians, is a model that we've never seen in this country. Solar has given us a good leg up as far as understanding how consumer energy resources can play a part. There's stories of up in northern Queensland during a natural disaster where a fire station could plug in EVs and actually, keep the lights on, keep water running as a refuge center. And that is the potential that batteries on wheels and effective vehicle to grid and vehicle to home technology can provide. Some of the roadblocks that, this is not an exhaustive list at all. We just had AS477.2 come out, which is fantastic. That's taken another hurdle down. I hope, by the end of next year, you're, charging your entire house and the barbecue and, PlayStation 5 with your car. That would be amazing.
And my neighbor's house, maybe.
Exactly. You can take the PlayStation camping with you. The kids will be thrilled.
I mean, we're saying these things tongue in cheek, but these are also the reasons that the average consumer should be interested in and excited about V2G. I think at the moment, so much of the conversation is focused on policy, it's focused on grid stability, that someone thinking about whether they're going to buy their first EV next year, they don't think this conversation is for them because they live in the city or they live in the suburbs. They have, a stable electricity supply to their house. They don't really think or understand what the benefit is to them in vehicle to grid and why it's such a big deal. But the little list you reeled off and a whole lot more other benefits that we're going to see roll out over time.
Exactly. And, ideal market conditions and ideal control mechanisms, you could potentially sell power from your battery at peak demand time when, it's parked in the garage and you're not taking it out until tomorrow morning or Monday morning. And you can actually sell back to the grid. And if you say charged it midday, you're probably charging it with amazing solar powered, cheap renewable energy, and then selling it at times when potentially there's less of that. So you can actually help stabilize the grid by storing that energy and selling it back at the right time. Initial, evidence around there talks some very exciting figures around the $10,000 and $11,000 a year mark. Once it is commercially available, those figures are probably a bit high for realistic application. But, in the cost of living crisis that we live, even a few dollars would make a huge difference to a lot of families. And those benefits must be considered and kept in mind.
Well, I like the idea of that. My car sitting there making some money for me while I'm sleeping is definitely a good change to what cars have typically been, which is a cash drain. So it costs a fair bit of money. It's about time to start pulling some weight down.
Definitely. So I think that's all we've got time for today. It's been fantastic having you on. Thanks for giving us the time, Catherine.
Thank you, Catherine. Thanks, Dan. We'll see you next time.
Stay with us. Coming up next, our conversation with Geordie Zafiris, a solutions engineer from Fronius. Today, we're joined by Geordie Zafiris, who is an EV charging solutions engineer at Fronius. Before that, spent about 5 years working at Delta. Geordie comes from an engineering background and hopefully brings some really new, different perspectives to the podcast. Thanks for joining us, Geordie.
Yeah, not a problem. Thanks for having me, guys. Really appreciate it.
Pleasure. So maybe to get things started, how did you get into this industry? How did you find yourself where you are now?
Yeah, so I guess from when I finished school, I was really interested in engineering ever since I was a kid, and I ended up sort of going into electrical engineering. Absolutely loved it, and started off working at Delta Electronics. As soon as I finished my last exam, was pretty much literally the day after I started working there as tech support, just for a solar inverter product. And then slowly that sort of started to expand. So I really, I guess you'd say I really enjoyed doing what I was doing. And I saw that there was some flaws in systems, and I really wanted to, I guess, optimize everything that I was doing. So improving the product so that we could, save ourselves from doing so much tech support, improving a lot of the process to do with the whole RMA system. And eventually it just got to a point where I was just working directly with R&D teams, working to actually develop new products and make new features, putting in new requests for all sorts of things. And got really into compliance, regulation, and how to make things from scratch with a team. So, yeah.
Okay, I guess that's kind of the tech or engineering equivalent of starting in the mailroom and working your way up.
Yeah, that's it.
So you said you had the first day out of uni starting at Delta.
Mm-hmm.
So you must have been a bright star in your last year of university to have that lined up already.
Yeah, I did pretty well. I was really happy with myself. I graduated with first class honours at RMIT. Absolutely loved the degree. And it was my first interview as well when I did it with Delta. And I was a little bit nervous, but I felt like I had everything, I guess, under my belt because I had just done my exam. So I just knew everything that I could possibly
fresh
know.
Knowledge.
Yeah, fresh out of the exam. So, got hired straight after that.
So you've now transitioned to the Fronius team, who are well known in the solar industry. Obviously a company with a very long track record based out of Austria. Obviously a great company to be a part of. Can you tell us a little bit about what your focus and role is for them today?
Yep. Yeah, definitely. So my focus is around 3 different topics. So the first topic would be EV charging in general. So I'm the product manager for the Fronius Watt Pilot and also our brand new Fronius Watt Pilot Flex, which we've just announced today, and also the bidirectional charging side of things as well. So that's obviously a big up and coming thing, and we're really looking forward to it. And the next topic would be the power system simulation side of things. So whenever things get, I guess, big commercial solar plants, like we're talking 1.5 megawatts plus or maybe 5 megawatts plus, usually they have to do a simulation study and find out how the grid's going to respond to so much generation in the one place. So for that, I'll usually get involved and help with any simulation works that need to be done with the model of our inverter. And the last topic is cybersecurity. So cybersecurity kind of ties into both, definitely into the commercial side, because we see in a lot of commercial installs, cybersecurity is becoming a more important topic, especially for government buildings, making sure that the devices that are installed are actually something that is safe for, I guess, being connected to that network, so that data can't go flying around in the places that it shouldn't. So yeah, those are the three main topics for me, really.
So Fronius being a European company, you must have, sort of counterparts in Europe. And, what we know is that Europe in some ways is far ahead of Australia in terms of the EV transition, certainly in terms of vehicles on the road. So do you have much interplay with the European team? Like, how do you extract, the key learnings from that market and sort of readdress that to Australia?
Yeah, for sure. So I guess in Europe, it is a bit different. From a cybersecurity point of view, we see what they're doing over there, and they have, for example, the NIS 2.0, which is like a big cybersecurity framework. It kind of covers a lot of operational business kinds of topics to make sure that the business is operating in a way where we're doing secure development processes, and we're making sure that, I guess, our devices are actually made in a way where they're secure as well. So seeing what they do in Europe is nice it's a nice to have.
So I guess for the people who may be listening to this who install electric vehicle chargers or consumers considering one, Fronius is known for the Watt Pilot, which has one of the unique elements is it can be unplugged from the wall, taken with you, and is effectively a portable fast charger. So can you tell us a little bit about how you see that sort of point of difference playing out? Is that something that you get a lot of feedback from installers or consumers on?
Yeah, I think a lot of people actually really like it. You can take it with you, and sometimes you do actually come across a 3-phase socket in showgrounds. At the showgrounds, they have some. Every now and then you'll come across a different spot with a point where you can actually plug it in, which is really nice. Take it with you to work. Yeah, we've gotten some really good feedback on that. It's got a whole heap of features in the Watt Pilot. It's probably, in my opinion, the most feature-rich EV charger you can purchase, with the whole PV surplus, dynamic load balancing inbuilt. You'll find that some EVs will behave differently when you plug them in and start to charge them. So in our Watt Pilot, you can actually adjust different settings to accommodate for those different vehicles when they try and fall asleep if they haven't been charged for a while or whatever it may be. And also keeping it within the same Fronius ecosystem. So if you've got a battery there, you can make sure you're not unloading your entire, BYD battery into your EV. So they all work together seamlessly.
Maybe let's touch on where V2G crosses over with cybersecurity, because that's it's a very interesting aspect of vehicle to grid. It's probably one that for a lot of people is lower down the list. Certainly in the consumer space, people are thinking about when can I plug my vehicle back in with bidirectional charging so that I can start making some money by selling power back to the grid. Thinking about cyber, thinking about the software that allows that is quite a long way down for them, but obviously top of mind for you. So what are the big risks with bidirectional charging and having lots of vehicles plugged in and getting grid data?
Yeah, so I'll probably take that one back to the solar industry and just seeing what's happening there, because it's very similar, a bidirectional charger compared to a solar inverter. So at the moment, we're seeing that there's actually quite a bit of a gap from a cybersecurity point of view. So if I was to say, Fronius has been probably sold about 3.5 megawatts in the last 6 years or so of residential inverters into the country. And considering that how much generation there is with our products, and let's just say, for example, we were able to control all of those, like remotely turn them off or on. We can't do that with all of them, but let's just say some OEMs are able to do that. That can pose a significant risk, because it means that if some foreign actor was able to come in and turn off hundreds of megawatts of inverters.
The clickbait headline is China will turn off our inverters and turn off our vehicles.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of where I was going to go with that. And, there's always a possibility that somebody could come in and turn things off when they're not supposed to be turned off. And it could cause a serious problem for us as a country. I mean, we're looking at quite literally a national security threat as well. So when we look at what's currently in legislation, there's the Security of Critical Infrastructure Act. And that actually deems critical infrastructure to be, or for the energy industry at least, 30 megawatt plants and above are subject to lots of cybersecurity rules and obligations. And that usually goes back to what we call the Australian Energy Cybersecurity Framework. However, that 30 megawatt threshold doesn't actually consider distributed energy resources. And that's where that gap is really. And then the other side of cybersecurity for V2G is between the EV and the car itself as well. So making sure that if somebody is going to go plug their car into a charger, let's say it's a public charger, and they've got the fancy plug and charge, so you're plugging it in, the EV charger already knows who it is that's plugging in and can just start charging immediately. You don't want to have somebody be able to pretend that there's somebody else. That would be a bit of a disaster. So that would be just an example of a problem there. But this new ISO 15118-20 standard covers that in great detail to prevent problems like that.
And is cybersecurity, I mean, obviously it's about managing risks. We've seen that, like, obviously there could be people with foreign entities, as you mentioned, with malintention. But at the same time, we've seen so many big corporations get hacked just by people who are hacking because they can hack. So I guess for someone who's trying to create trouble, turning off, a percentage of the electricity market might be a fun thing to do on the weekend.
Yeah, that could be a bit of a disaster, but.
And how does this fall under your role? What are you actually doing week to week, month to month that touches on this aspect of cybersecurity?
Yeah, so it's mostly just keeping up to date with new standards and regs. I'm part of 2 cybersecurity committees as well, just to find out what's happening, what's the latest, has there been any problems recently? So I also get reports from Australian Signals Directorate. They give me some threat intelligence about what's happening in the energy industry. Is there any problems coming up that we should be aware of?
Okay. Any classified information you'd like to share with us today?
Lips are sealed.
Yeah, okay. I recently read a story as well that one of the major Chinese manufacturers, in their cars, they have a built-in 4G SIM, and a clever customer was able to actually find the phone number for that SIM, make a phone call to it, and without any notification popping up on the car's screen or dashboard, they were able to listen into the car as well. So I guess there's all sorts of types of risks that may pop up when going down in this path with a new technology.
Yeah, there's stuff that pretty much no one's even thought of that people are trying to do these days. And with the advent of AI helping them out as well, it actually can create quite a lot of problems. So that's going to be something that everybody's going to have to be uplifting in the future.
It sounds like you're going to be busy over the next decade.
Yeah, probably pulling my hair out.
What about looking really far ahead? I mean, we've covered topics that might take us to maybe 5 years into the future. If we look 20 years into the future, what does EV charging look like in Australia? Do you have information from behind the curtain from your role?
My prediction would be that pretty much the majority of the market will have bidirectional charging capabilities. You'll be able to rock up to a public charging station, just plug it in, it'll start charging, it'll know who you are, it'll bill you accordingly. Yeah, I think that the whole EV boom will pretty much have already happened. I think, 10 years, 15 years into the future, the majority of people probably own an EV. That's just the way that things seem to be. And yeah, I think it's going to be quite a big transition. I don't really know what will happen to all the ICE cars at this point. Maybe there's a bit of a market there to do a conversion, change them into an EV. But still, waiting to see what's going to happen.
Okay, well, I think that just about does it, Geordie. We've run out of time. So thank you so much for spending some time with us. It's great to get a really technical perspective and an introduction to some topics that we haven't covered on this podcast before, including, the cybersecurity that you've really become an expert in. So thank you for giving us your time.
Cool. Not a problem. Really appreciate being on here, guys. Have a good one. Thanks.
Thank you.
So that's it. And thanks for listening to this episode of the EV Charging Podcast. Brought to you, as always, by Solar Choice, Australia's only instant quote comparison service for solar, EV chargers, heat pumps, batteries, and air conditioning systems. We also provide independent consultation and tender management for clean energy projects in commercial and strata buildings with over 17 years of experience. Find out more at solarchoice.net.au and stay tuned for the next episode in 2 weeks.
If you enjoyed the show, please consider leaving us a review on your favourite podcast app and make sure you share an episode with someone else who might like it. See you on the next one.